think is really important is you got to adapt or you're going to die.
The VDC Systems lead at Hansen-Rice Inc., Joe Wolf.
So if you look at our industry now and your mindset is, well, we're not going to do it until the client pays for it, you're going to die.
So the best way for growth is collective testing and collective learning and sharing of information.
Even the old supers are wanting to get into this.
Yeah.
Do I have to learn something new and kind of a new way to do it? Yes. But it's going to make my job so much easier.
If you want to be an industry leader, a thought leader, you have to be on that front end and willing to take some of the time, some of the risk.
We're going to have a survey out. We're going to set up a control network. Then we're going to scan. Throw in a little bit of mobile scanning for areas that aren't as critical.
There's a lot of technicalities to understand to be good at scanning, but it's also very true to say that it has gotten way easier.
What's exciting in the future, it's the interconnectivity of it all. Being able to take all your data and put it into one system.
Today, excited to have Joe Wolf here in studio in Boise. Joe, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Okay, I've known you for a little while.
It's been a minute.
So you're probably one of the longest known relationships that I still work with in the industry, being that we actually met back in high school days.
Yeah.
And so there's been a little bit of a journey. But as always on the podcast, the goal is to dig into some of your story, like when you first got into the industry, and then we'll kind of make our way through to current of like, what do you do now and where things are at. So I like going all the way back because I think it's interesting to hear how people got into their role, what inspired them to, or what led to that. So first question is actually all the way back. What did you think you wanted to do growing up?
Oh man, that's a good question. I had all kinds of ideas when I was growing up of what I wanted to be, and, little boy dreams of crazy things. Somehow ended up in the oil patch, which was always what I was told not to end up in.
Somehow being we were in Bakersfield, and that's what you do.
That's the job, oil or ag, pick one.
Yeah.
I started working when I was in high school and then worked as a mover and then got into oil field mechanic work and became a Sparky in the oil fields. And I remember being on a job site, and this is when I first saw the tech. And I remember being out there and we were working, it's like 110, pretty standard temp. And then we work between two oil heaters. So it's like 130 degrees. And we're rebuilding this PLC cabinet. And we're just sitting there, we're sweating, we're miserable. It's Sparky work. It's not like it's hard, but it's still miserably hot. And this guy pulls up and he comes out and he puts on his hard hat and it's perfectly brand new and shiny. We're like, great. We got one of these guys. Sets up this tripod, puts a piece of equipment on there, presses a button, and goes and sits back in the air conditioner. A few minutes later, goes out and does it again and again. And after like the fifth time, I'm like, I got to go talk to this guy. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm scanning this, 3D scanning the stuff, and we're going to do red lines from it. Like, I'm going to be doing red lines on this stupid thing I just built, and I'm going to have to stand here and do this. And I was like, that's cool, and I want to figure out more about that. So around that same time, I had been introduced to CAD in electrical school, and we were talking about drafting, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I like that concept. I like to hand draw when I build things anyway. So I started exploring that and got picked up by this little engineering firm. Great company. They hired me legitimately. They hired me to learn CAD in my free time and the rest of the time to argue with engineers about how would we actually build this in the field.
Yep.
Which was a lot of fun for like a 21-year-old kid to sit there and argue with 70-year-old engineers. Like, look, you're a little wrong in this. I'm never going to do that because that's going to be way harder. This is going to be way simpler. But it was really cool for building my understanding. I got to see kind of both sides of it, understand how we would put it together, but then I'd understand how the design process went, what their reasoning was, why they did it, get to see the whole picture and be like, oh, I totally get why you want me to do this when I would actually rather do this because it changed to all of this. Mike, one of my engineers, he made me hand draft. Everything I did, I would hand draft it first, and then I'd go back and get to put it in CAD. And his whole reasoning is I want you to think as you're drawing this line that you're actually putting this piece of equipment in or this conduit or whatever. And that was like game changing for me as a professional, like emerging professional learning was like, oh, I actually have to think through all of this, slow it down and then go through it all.
That actually goes to like a lot of people ask now, do we think the technology's dumbing us down or something? It's like, if you actually think about that, sometimes the automated things, if someone starts just throwing CAD work in there, they may not stop and think about what detail you would have back in the day when it was, your hand drafting. You're really thinking about every single piece you're drawing it, versus relying on tools. That's a interesting point.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Like you get to look more at the big picture now and kind of pre-plan, but you do kind of lose some of that minute detail. Field to fit was my favorite note of all time. As a field guy, I hated that note, but when I got into design,
Just
I'm like,
make it work.
I don't know, field to fit, whatever, they'll figure it out. But yeah, so it was cool getting to go through that process. I learned a lot from that company. They eventually got bought out by Stantec, which was different. But around the time we got purchased by Stantec, me and you started talking again about you had just started getting into laser scanning. You're like, I need somebody that can speak oil field. I'm like, I know that very well.
Yep.
So gosh, that was over 10 years ago now.
Yep.
Probably pushing 11 or 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I got into the reality capture industry, went to work with you. And, that was the start of it. That's where it all kind of began.
Yeah. If you look back at kind of those early days of you coming in and learning about scanning and getting into it and going out on projects, like what are some of the things that, you remember either exciting you about it or why you wanted to get into it? And or if you can remember any like challenges or projects that were challenging as we're starting to like explore the new tech, anything that comes to mind there?
Oh man, it was all challenges in the beginning, all of it. That's the best part about this industry. I mean, you can do something 100 times and each time it might be a little bit different. There's a new problem. I think the coolest thing for me was getting to see on a computer what we went and captured.
Yeah.
I think in 3D, when I build stuff, I have to build it in my head. I have to see it through, and then getting to translate that from here's this physical asset. And without me having to draw it, we just capture the data and there it is. And I have all the data I could possibly imagine. I don't have to go back out. That was something we always ran into when we go do red lines or measure for new design, is we'd have to eventually go back out because somebody forgot to measure something somewhere, or the measurement just didn't make sense. And then just be able to have that and then go back to the office and be like, here it is. Every single thing you could possibly need to know, I've got it. We were working for a survey company at the time. So I think that was like one of the best things, just because it gave us the understanding of high accuracy measurements and how much that is critical to good scanning. Yeah. You're going to build up this traverse error in survey. Yeah, that's standard. And you do your traverse error calculations and you get it out of it. In scanning, that stacks up way different. Yeah, it doesn't just translate 1-to-1. You can stitch it with a point cloud and you think it works great. I remember that. I remember when we got the new computers and they were beefy and we were like, we're just going to run everything cloud to cloud. It's going to be awesome. And then we did that and it all went horrible.
Oh yeah. Early days of cloud to cloud were very challenging.
Hours and hours of waiting and then to find out it didn't work and then doing it again and again and again.
Yeah. I think, the fact that started around survey gave an understanding of, what to look for, how to compare, how to QC, how to check, which is, I think, what led to a lot of the things that, I talk a lot about the survey piece and the accuracy and trying to help people build that workflow now. Wouldn't have ever gotten that if it didn't start around survey. And I look at the firms now who just try to get into the tech but don't understand that piece. And it's still a challenge because, people that don't understand the survey aspect or the control aspect, they don't know how to look for potential problems or know if they can trust the data that's coming out. So I think the fact it started all around that, I think was a big plus.
I think that is the most important part of scanning. Like when we go through, when we reach out to subs and stuff for proposals for scanning, and if they're not doing survey, it's an immediate out the door. I don't even want to talk to you.
Yeah.
This is crucial, especially for, I work in construction now and setting up a control network for the entire job site so that we can always, chain back to that. It's the most important piece of all the VDC for me.
So let's talk about this a little bit. So, we worked together for a few years doing services, out doing scanning, doing survey. and then you went and stepped into a construction firm where now you're getting to be on that inside of like, hey, these are our big critical projects, there's all these requirements, and you get to bring that background to say like, how can we use technology to help these? How has the last few years, like what did that look like early on for stepping into that role? And then like, how have you seen that grow in whether the adoption of the technology or the interest in it, or, you know, what's some of that journey look like?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted to see what the other side of the table looked like. You know, I understood the service provider side. I'm like, okay, well, how are they actually using this data? So I went over to this construction company. It's Hansen-Rice Construction here in Idaho. They're a great company. And like, hey, you know, I want to come work with you guys. I mean, I think they were our oldest client.
Yeah, we had done a bunch of work. Yeah,
I think that was my first scan job, was with Hansen-Rice.
Yeah.
So we went over there, and you know, kind of my first year was a lot of really kind of goofy things. Like we were, you know, mostly renderings and taking our Revit models and trying to make them look pretty, and working with Unreal Engine to see if we could make pieces of equipment move on the conveyors, and trying to figure all that out. And it was kind of not beneficial to the company. So my second year, I told my boss, I was like, hey, I want to step back. I want to be a drafter for a year. And I want to go and I want to build the buildings from the lowest position possible, so there's no potential to screw it up, and learn how to do it. So I got to do that for a year. They were on board with it. They thought that was a great idea. And I got to sit down and kind of like, okay, cool. Like, what's a stem wall? You know, ask these really dumb questions, but you don't know, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. And get there, and we went through a couple buildings, and you know, saw them all the way through construction, and kind of saw like areas where I'm like, hey, this would be a really good spot to scan. This would be really good to know this kind of data. We should be modeling this, and right now we're just putting a general detail that's not gonna fly. So you know, spent about a year doing that, and then started kind of building in and making it more of a standard practice. Like, hey, look, this is a pitfall we run into. This is a continuous issue. These things we need to capture. I understand it's money, but that's all right. Let's get it taken care of and save ourselves a ton of money in the future. Hansen-Rice has always been really good about adopting the scanning and new tech, so that wasn't too hard of a sell.
Sure.
But the one thing I've come to find about this industry is it is always a sales job.
Yeah.
And I thought it was hard being a service provider. Then you get into a company in a department, and you're like, oh no, I have to sell to the company and to the client. So now it's twice as much, and that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we started scanning more often and using that data in mostly brownfield. So when we're going to tie into an existing building or, you know, equipment or modify buildings, we were scanning all of that so we could create an accurate as-built model, because there's no such thing as an accurate as-built model that's not scanned. It's just, if it's a construction drawing with red lines, something's wrong somewhere. Somebody pulled a tape measure and doesn't know how to read it.
Yep.
It's just going to happen.
Yep.
Walls aren't orthogonal. There's not a perfect 90-degree corner anywhere. And when you're designing off of that, those are huge issues that hit when you hit in the construction cycle. I mean, they're going to cause delays. They're going to cause a ton of budgets, you know, creep. It's not great.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit to, you know, let's take an expansion project of some industrial building. We don't have to get super specific, but a lot of companies still don't scan, still don't do scan to BIM. They don't do as-builts. They don't even know about this technology really yet, right? Some are still early on, and a lot of those companies that would question, hey, if I have an as-built drawing that someone's provided that building, why would I go out and scan? Can you talk from the construction side? Like, I think parts of construction have changed too. And, you know, if you're going to do really accurate fabrication, right? Or you're going to install steel, or you're going to put automation systems, like, why should companies that maybe are in that phase not trust an as-built, or what types of potential issues, you know, would a construction company face if they don't have that accurate information? What are some?
I can give one great example that we ran into recently, where we had a set of drawings, and they're like, we're just going to go off these as-builts. They're pretty new. They're like a few years old. We get the crews out. We've designed this building. As they're putting in the foundation, they find out the building is 6 feet longer than the actual drawings.
That's nice, and
trenches are dug.
Nice and close, but
we have all the framing up. Like, we were ready to start pouring, and they're like, why is it offset from the other building? That to me right there, that's huge.
Yeah.
New drawings. I mean, maybe a few years old,
And we're not saying an inch difference.
No, we're talking 6 feet.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a beam stretcher. I'm going to save anybody going out that's kind of green. If somebody asks you for a beam stretcher, it doesn't exist. We can't just stretch a beam out. So when you have these prefabricated steel buildings, you've ordered all this steel. It's coming to the job site. It's already cut. It's ready to go. It's just adult Legos. You're assembling it, right?
Which is very expensive. It's already taken the time to get there.
The lead time on that alone, you're ordering steel 30% of your design because you have to get it so that it can make it, 8 months later to the job site on time. Yep. Otherwise, you're going to be delayed. So if you don't have that all correct, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Is there things they can work around in the field? Yeah, but it's going to require a ton of design work, redesign work, planning, structural, re-permitting, and then the field time alone. And you just delayed, let's just say 3-4 weeks. I mean, that's a few $1 million in just time for something that was a bad measurement off of an as-built.
And so that would be an example of a project where a lot of clients, right, whether it be a construction company or maybe the owner or somebody that doesn't understand that happens very often, are usually hesitant to say, hey, let's scan it or let's model it because it's going to cost, let's say a random number, $50,000. It's going to cost $100,000. And up front, it's like, oh, that's a big chunk of money we don't want to spend. But when you look at how often does something like this happen on a construction job, I think that more companies that start to trial this and pilot this and test it and run into this a couple times get to the point they realize like, okay, we have to just start doing it every time, whether we think what we have is accurate or not, because of the risk of not doing it. Mm-hmm. But I still see a lot of companies struggle with that up front because it's almost like insurance, right? You're like, it might not happen. Yeah. It might be close. How have you seen your guys' approach or thought about how often to use the tech change? Has it gotten to the point you're like, it's every job or where's the threshold of like, do we choose to use it or not? What's some of your thought around that?
Yeah, actually that's kind of changed recently, which has been really cool. We've always used it as like a value add to the client and we're going to do this or, like I said, when it's brownfield, like we're going to do it just so we can make sure we got this all right. But within this last year, we've had a mindset change of a company of like, it doesn't matter. We're going to do it. This is now part of our process. We have to do this, whether the client pays for it or not. Ideally, they would. That's great. It's their data. If not, we're still doing it because we need the data.
Yeah.
Which has been really kind of cool to see. There's always some jobs where it's like, no, we don't need to pull this sledgehammer out to do this finishing hammer's job. Yep. It's like, well, it can be within 4 or 5 inches. We're just putting this pad in a piece of equipment. Like it's fine. But, those important jobs where the details matter, it doesn't matter if it's a really small one. If it's moving a structural wall or we're going to be penetrating through some of that, yeah, you got to find it. I mean, you can sit there and kind of guess and take your shot, but the likelihood of hitting something, it is an insurance policy. If there's one way to look at it, that's kind of the way I used to think of it. It's like, this is just purely insurance. Now looking at it, it's literally just standard practice.
Yeah.
This is bare minimum.
Yeah. And, I think, industries have seen tech and process change like that over the years, right? Where it went from hand drafting to CAD drafting, from CAD drafting to 3D modeling because of the perspective. And I think we're at that point that for the last while, 10 years even, I mean, since we've been in it, it's been a nice to have, it's been a luxury. I think we're finally at this point that literally the last couple years and the next few years is where we're starting to see the massive increase in belief, in adoption, in it becoming a normal part of process because the equipment is becoming easier to use or cheaper. There's more people using it. So you're not down to just like one provider on the other side of the world. Like it's becoming more known. The platforms that we design in accept the data easily. Everybody's making the process easier to use, more affordable to use. And then the use cases are being proven out. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of it, being adopted and the scale and the desire for it growing quite a bit.
I was having this conversation with my company actually after RCN this year. And, I love going because it's just a great check to see like, where's the industry at? And for as long as we've been in this, it's been like, we're on the top of that hype curve, right? Like that's where it's always been at. Maybe the last 4 or 5 years, we're in the valley of despair, but that's a whole other conversation. But it was really cool to see this year. It was no longer like, how do we get the clients? How do we sell the jobs? It was, oh God, we have all the clients. We have all this data. How are we going to manage it? How are we going to run it? How are we going to hire people when there's not enough people to hire that have any experience at all?
Yeah.
And that shift this year, like I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is no longer, you know, last few years, it's been the big companies. It's their standard process. Now it's everyone.
Yep.
It is, you're going to be so far behind if you're not doing it now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the day in and day out.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of those things are real question marks or concerns, you know, and they're hard to tackle. Some of them we hope to with RCN, with like committees and working toward education content and building guidelines or, you know, certification or training material. Because, you know, we talk about resources, right? If every construction company in the country decides to start scanning everything, who's going to do it? You know, and who's coming out of school to hire that already knows how to do it?
Yeah.
Not really anybody. Like, and there are some programs at different universities that like introduce you to a drone or introduce you to a laser scanner, or, you know, they've started to see it and started to educate on it, but only to the point that someone knows it might exist, not actually can step into a job and do it. So right now it's like everything is on the job training. Everything is, you know, you got to hire someone brand new and bring them up in it, which takes time. And so I keep saying, I really think the demand over the next few years is going to far outpace the current like reality capture industry's ability to keep up with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been having this thought too. Like, I need to grow my department, and I'm like, who am I going to hire?
Yeah.
Where am I going to, I'm not going to just go out to the high school job fair, the college job fair, and be like, oh yeah, you know, you guys already have some experience in this. Great. No, it's kind of a niche industry that's going to massively ramp up over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And I think I'd be interested to hear some of your thought on conversations like from your guys' side. I think a lot of companies question, should we hire a professional scanning, you know, company to come do our work, or should we build our own department? And I think, to be honest, I don't think there's one right answer. I really think it's a company decision, because you're either really going to build out a department and do it all, or you're going to have enough understanding, but you still partner with people. And because of the demand, you know, I don't think there's any reason. I think some companies are afraid like, oh, at some point everyone's going to just do their own work. I think there's so much work to do, so much demand that both of those can be right answers. But what's some of your guys' current, you know, thought or conversation around, hey, as we scale this, what do we do internally, and what do we look for partners to do, and how do we manage and grow this in a way that's, you know, scalable and sustainable? Yeah,
no, I mean, you nailed it there. We're always going to use service providers. We're going to be bringing it in-house, yes. But that's mostly going to be on the construction cycle. You know, as we do life cycle to construction, we're going to be scanning and milestone-based scanning. We can't just hire a subcontractor to be out on site all the time, because we really don't have time for any potential delays. If we're trying to stick to a construction schedule and we want to capture anchor bolts and stub ups and you know, certain things like that before pre-pour, we've got maybe 2 days to capture that data, register it, and verify it. At most. We can't just pay somebody to be on call, ready and waiting. But you know, those brownfields or those large scan projects where it's like, I don't need to send my guys to go do that. We'll hire that out. You have the equipment, you have the time. That's the smoothest operation. You have to blend both. I mean, probably certain companies can pick one or the other. We've historically always just subbed everything out. As we develop as a company and grow, you know, in this industry and adapt to that, we're going to be a little bit of hybrid and keep kind of both of them going.
I think one thing that's critical, which I think Hansen-Rice is doing a great job at, is at a minimum, making sure that you have some level of expertise internally, even if you're going to sub it out. Because a lot of companies that try to get started in this but don't have experience in it, they don't know what to ask for. They don't know what to look for. They don't know what tech the sub should be using. They don't know how to QC it. There's all these problems that come up. And I think historically, that's part of what has also caused issue in the industry, right? If a company just says, hey, I need someone to go scan this thing and give me some data, you get all kinds of responses, right? The wrong type of gear, people who don't know control, people that don't understand accuracies. So I think that any company that wants to grow it into a normal process has to start with that of like, how do we make sure we understand what we need and what we're asking for and how we manage it and all of that, even if you're gonna partner and, you use externally.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of comes back to like, how do we verify that somebody actually knows what they're doing? Because we went through that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, we went through that at Nexus and, in the beginning of like finding companies and providers and like, man, it's not an easy process.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to do that is, you need to find somebody that has some experience, that knows, but then you also need to train them in how you do it.
Yep.
I spent that year learning how Hansen-Rice does this. It's a different company. It's unique. How we approach it's different. Every business is like that. But going and understanding, okay, cool. This is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to work. It's not just a blanket scan everything.
Yep.
This is how we build buildings. This is why we have such a high return rate of clients. How do we improve on that and not redo it all?
Yep.
And that's kind of the key aspect of that. If you want to get into it.
Yeah.
You need to get into it. But if you want to go the hard route and just try and figure it out and bash your way through, that's great. They've got conferences now that you can go to. There's people that are willing to share experiences and knowledge, and that's what this industry has always been, which is why I love it.
Yeah.
There's no like secret sauce.
Yeah.
Nobody's got it. Everybody's like, hey, we found this issue, we found a workaround, and then they share it with everybody, because that's how this department grows, or this industry grows.
Yeah.
Going back to that hype curve, right? Like you're familiar with it, right? I distinctly remember it was about the time I came to Hansen-Rice is when we started plunging from that top peak to the valley of despair. And really what happened was the tech became more usable. There was a ton more softwares. At that time, it wasn't like, okay, we need this, and this, and we have to know all these softwares so we can get from this dot whatever to this dot whatever. I remember distinctly doing that, going through like 4 or 5 softwares to get to the extension we needed. And you had all these people just start flocking to it, which is great. But the problem is, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to use it and you're going to use it wrong. And then you're just going to put a bad taste in your mouth. And we went through so much of that. To the point that, it just crashed the industry more or less. People are like, no, we're not touching that. It doesn't work. We've never seen it work. It costs way too much money for something that isn't what we need. And it's like, well, because you haven't done it right.
Yeah.
You haven't had somebody that's actually, gone through all these failures to know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of that is the hope of the committees that we've started, is like, there are a good number of people in the industry that have been doing it a long time. They have failed a lot. I have no problem talking about all my failures. Look, when you don't have someone teaching you, you have to fail. You have to learn, where does the technology, where are its limits? Where does it work? Where does it not? You get this brand new tool that comes out, do the same thing, run through the whole thing. The whole hope of like this community and these committees is, let's get all the people together and share the failures, share the lessons learned, in order to collectively come up with like, okay, what is the actual best guideline for how to collect this type of data or this accuracy data, or when do we use this device versus the other? Is, the best way to learn is learning from other people's failures, right? You hear that a lot. And instead of every company on their own going through this full R&D process to come up with their own report just for themselves, if we do it as a community, it's like, okay, here's a pilot project that we want to know the outcome for. Now, a couple people collaborate on it and 100 people learn from it. Yeah. That has the ability to transform the issues and the concerns and the testing and the things that nobody has time or money to test every piece of gear, right? As a construction firm, as a service provider, no one owns it all. No one's the expert in all of it. So the best way for growth is collective testing and collective learning and sharing of information. And the industry is pretty good, and I think it's getting better, and I think even more so as we encourage it to get better in being open and sharing. There's a lot of people that are, there are still some that are pretty competitive and are like, hey, we don't want to tell you our secrets. We figured this out. But when you look at the whole industry, and it's cliche to say the rising tide lifts all boats, but it's very true, especially when you're in a niche industry. Like, if you look at the impact of sharing and helping everybody do better, it helps all the clients trust it more. It helps all the service providers deliver better, which makes everybody desire it more, which makes the demand grow. It literally is one of the only true scenarios that I think that it is the rising tide lifts all boats.
It really, especially like if you go and look at all the industries, right? It connects all of them. It's just like survey, right? Like survey is a license process. There's education, there's all kinds of committees, and they share all that information. Why? Because it connects all these different industries. Yeah, like as a construction company, are we competing with other construction companies? Yes. We're not competing on the reality capture side. We're competing on what do we do differently and how do we support our clients better.
Yep.
I might be a little biased. I think Hansen-Rice does a great job at it. But having that like, no, we're not going to share anything with you. Well, you're not going to get to learn anything either. You're going to have to fail all your own. We failed a ton. We've done all kinds of random industry.
Failure.
Yeah, that's 100% it. I am a licensed screw up. So
yes, if you want to become an expert in something, become the professional failure at it.
Well, there's this quote I love, and it's like, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly for a short time.
Yeah.
You have to go, and you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be the worst at it. And then you just keep doing it, and you'll get better at it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to work in all these different industries when we started out. I mean, just the most bananas projects and weird things.
Yeah.
Got to see so many cool things and really use the wrong tools for the wrong job and see the like, oh wow, that was dumb.
Yeah, that saying isn't for fun. It's like, no, we understand what that means. We have fully tested using the wrong tools for the wrong jobs.
And we have spent many late nights in the office trying to correct that issue. So now I'm in a construction company that works in, it's based in Idaho. We work across the US and we work in all kinds of different industries. I have a little bit of a feeling for all of them. I'm also kind of like, hey, we don't need this tool. We need this one.
So I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about that specifically. Again, from a construction company's perspective, from someone who does understand, some of every, a little bit of all the tools, maybe hands wet in them. How do you guys approach or see some of the differences, in the technology? Like, when do you choose to or okay with a sub using something that is faster and cheaper, like a mobile scanner, versus what types of projects or needs do you say, no, we need this as accurate as possible with control and terrestrial? Like, how do you manage or balance, or do you have some examples of like project types where you would say one or the other?
It is unique per project. That's why we had this discussion, like, you need to have somebody that knows what they're doing, just at least a good concept, so that we can pick. We could be doing industrial building here and here, and this one, we can just get away with some Insta360s and just capture as we go. But this one, we need Nat's ass. We need to know everything down to the minute detail. There isn't like a formula for it.
Yep.
You got to sit down and look at it, and then you got to have an open discussion with your sub. If you're subbing it out, be like, hey, look, these are what I want, and here's my reasonings. If you think that differently, explain to me why.
Yep. And
let's have an open discussion about it. We're both trying to succeed. This is truly the end game goal. We're both trying to help our client and get through that process. So picking it is kind of, let's talk about it.
Yep.
What does the client want? Let's have an open discussion with them. Let's really figure out, because they have a rough idea.
Yeah.
We're the experts. We're the one that put that rough idea into fine detail. But we want to understand their concept.
Yeah.
And then we say, okay, look, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
How do we support that? And then we get to go down to the sub level and be like, okay, look, this is what I need because this is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest suggestion there for people is, at least what I've seen other people say and what I've experienced is, everybody's trying to make it an exact formula of use this for this type of job. And it doesn't work because there are so many variables that could lead to needing something more accurate, needing something faster. Over ask. Like, you have to ask so many questions and think about all the potentials of what people would use it for to really narrow down. And the other thing is, if you're a person or a company that's like in that role of trying to define that and you don't understand the tech either, find someone who does that can help you understand the differences between them and what to ask for, because so many people historically have gone to use the wrong tool. And if you do this big project and it's like, oh, wait a minute, we thought we were doing it because you just wanted to see a pretty, marketing picture, but you actually wanted to measure steel. That's we got to redo the whole job, So there's a lot of people getting started in this now that don't even know the questions to ask. So if you're in that role, find somebody who does. Find someone in a construction firm, if you're a construction firm, and talk about and learn from each other. Or if you're trying to pick a scanner, find someone who uses scanners and ask them the questions.
And you nailed it there. Find someone who uses it. I love the hardware and software providers, but remember, they are selling a job.
Yeah.
You got to take what they say with a little bit of grain of salt.
Yes. I love them all. I don't say bad things, but when you are really trying to understand and learn about the tech, finding someone that has unbiased opinion that will tell you the differences that they understand between them. And even if you find different people who only use one or the other, like talk to several, don't just go with the first tool you hear about. Big point.
Yeah. Lots. There's a lot of experience out there that people are willing to share and share their hilarious stories of like, I don't know, putting beanies on a laser scanner so you can stick it in a freezer.
We've tried a little bit of everything.
We've done it. Does it work? Surprisingly, yes, but is it ideal? No. Don't go in and out of the freezer either.
Yeah.
You gotta
pick one. Be completely frozen.
Make sure you're getting into a freezer and you don't show up in t-shirt and jeans and then go in a -15 freezer for an hour. It's there's little
good
things.
For you. Yeah, I hear it's healthy. Cold plunging, freezers,
that's what it is. Yeah, this industry's got it all.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that you can't just have like a formula.
Yeah,
it can't exist. That's pigeonholing yourself. And this industry attracts a certain type of person. It's somebody that really has probably severe ADHD and needs to bounce around and know a lot about a lot of things.
Yeah,
and can kind of work well under pressure and dynamically.
I was told by the doctor they think that's why I've done okay in business is ADHD. I've had people talk to me about it, and I was like, okay, maybe I need to try getting on some, ADHD medication so that I can like see what it's like to calm down and think about one thing at a time.
That sounds miserable to me.
And they said, we really don't recommend you do this. I was like, okay.
It's one of those things you just got to learn how to control, right? Like it's a superpower. It really is. I mean, I'm not going to do something until it is the absolute worst time to do it. Yeah. And now the pressure's high and now I'm going to excel at it.
Yes. Oops.
Which is the best part about this job is because that's pretty much all the time. Yeah. It's all the time is crunch time. Everything's got to happen just right. And you got to really be on your feet for it, which is fun.
Yep. Okay. So we really got up to the current and some of the things going on. What comes to mind as far as like technologies that excite you right now? Even if it's just like in the recent years, like what do you see changing with the tech that you're either already implemented or you're excited about? And then we can go even a little further to like, where do you see some of it going,
Yeah. One of the coolest things I think has happened is the Leica 360. RC 360 is impressive. I remember, when we first started this, like sitting there and have to try and remember, okay, I scanned here at this angle and this angle and this angle. I've got 30 scans around this piece of equipment. I have all the angles and you're trying to build this in your head. Yeah. You don't have to do that anymore. Yeah. Or you don't have to keep, the vision or whatever it is. And it tracks for you as you move and helps auto. Like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing.
Yeah.
The usability of that now is insane.
People don't know what it was like back in the day if they're getting started now, where it's like, the scanners didn't show you previews of what you were doing. They didn't tell you if it was going to link yet. It didn't, You
had to build
there was
all
also
that
no
in
cloud
your
to cloud. You're like laying out physical targets as you go, and
somebody's going to come by and move your targets.
Or
knock them off a shelf and then put them back up, and you're like, why is this not working?
And I, it's still tricky. It's still difficult. There's a lot of technicalities to understand to be good at scanning, especially on big projects, complex projects. But it's also very true to say that it has gotten way easier because of those changes of the cloud to cloud, the linking, the app in the field, like all of those things. It is really becoming easier to perform and so much faster. I mean, most terrestrial scanners now, and it started with a couple of them like making big changes, but now it's to the point most terrestrial scanners have a couple minute option where it used to be like, we're sitting there for 12 minutes watching this one thing scan, which is why back in your old example, you'd go start it and you go sit in the truck and you'd like email and you're
behind something,
waiting for one freaking scan.
Do the scanner dance and rock around it for the whole 12 minutes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the 12-minute scan and the 1-minute scan are the same scan now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
We used to spend days on site capturing data, and it can be done in a day now.
Yeah.
And then you throw in like mobile scanning, and we're talking what, 60,000 square feet a day?
Oh, more than that.
With
mobile.
Way more than that.
Yeah, and you know, that goes to a lot of people look at the speed of tech or the variety coming out and the cost and you know, the tools, the faster tools don't necessarily replace the slower ones, but what it's done is open the variety of like how you use them, when you use them. It's making things that would not have been cost effective to do, effective to do. You know, use an example of a company owns hundreds of buildings. You know, the cost to fully control and do high-level terrestrial scanning and all of this just for inventory, unreasonable, wouldn't do it. It's not worth the cost. Mobile scanning has become fast enough and cheap enough that if that's the use case, now they can actually consider moving into using this type of tech for that type of application. You know, historically, it was only really critical projects that needed really high accuracy that could afford the budget. Now it's like, well, wait a minute, there's like a $5,000 device that I can go map a room with. Like, there's such a variety that it's spreading who can use it and the value. That's what I love about seeing all the different devices. And people have to think about it about that. It can't be this new one replaces all the old one. It's what is it good at? And you can mix them, which is the best part. Like, we'll go onto a project, we're going to pull control. You know, we're going to have a survey out, we're going to set up a control network, then we're going to scan terrestrial. And then we might throw in a little bit of mobile scanning for areas that aren't as critical. You know, if we've got a mating wall that we're going to be building off of, we're going to scan that. Both sides terrestrial, we're going to get high detail. But we need to know the rest of the building for some basic layout and stuff. We're just going to mobile scan that real quick. We still got the data. We're going to drone it. We're going to 360 camera it while we're in construction. You know, 5 pieces of tech on one job site. And you can mix it all, and that's the way it should be, because you have now captured everything you need, and you're not bringing the wrong tool to the job. You know, we've scanned buildings in the past. Bring all the tools to the job. We scanned buildings in the past where we've terrestrial scanned the entire building. We didn't need it. You didn't need the whole building terrestrially scanned. And at the time, mobile scanning wasn't accurate enough. There. It wasn't good. You couldn't mix them. You know, and being able to do that now, like if you say what's exciting me in the future, it's the interconnectivity of it all. Being able to take all your data and put it into one system. I think drone deploy has really kind of, that's doing good there. That's pretty cool. Be able to mix the terrestrial and the aerial data, plus their whole new like automated drone launcher. Oh my gosh, that thing is so stupid. I love it so much. I want one so bad. That's awesome. But you know, then you can throw that. You could throw all that into like a touchscreen TV in the job trailer, and all the guys can come in and literally pull up all of the BIM data and the actual captured data and pull it up on that screen. Just kind of look at it and be like, oh yeah, we're gonna have an issue, or you know, we can work around that. We got a field change we got to work on, or we're gonna move something, and cool, well, let's look at it right here. Oh yeah, we got it. Like, great. I think that part of it, the visualization, the interconnectivity, and then also it's kind of cool to see like even the old supers are wanting to get into this. The young guys obviously want to get into it, but even the older guys are like, no, that's crazy. Because when we first started doing it, I remember like you're going to go to a super and he's like, I've been doing this for 40 years this way. This is how it's done. This is how I'm going to do it. I get your lasers. You've got a whole lot to think about, but seeing that mind shift change of like, actually, no, this is going to make my life easier. Do I have to learn something new and kind of a new way to do it? Yes. But it's going to make my job so much easier. And another part, you know, nothing against the older guys, there are many of them that are getting on board now. And another big reason, you know, we're also starting to see is that there's guys that are retiring out, and we have college grads stepping into new roles. And so we're also seeing some of that change in like who is on the site, who is the engineer, who is the superintendent. And we have some of this younger, innovative, you know, that are born with iPads in their hands. So they're like, I don't want a big stack of papers. You mean I can use an iPad? Like, so I think we're also seeing some of that change that is driving some of the adoption as well. So all of these things, the speed, the diversity of technology, the cost coming down, it's all a driver for why it's really not a question. It is a fact that the demand of all this stuff is growing. Yeah, we are in that like plateau now. Like if you're getting in now, you're kind of behind, it's still the perfect time to get in. But it's cool to see, like we've been in this long enough to see all the struggles, all the failures, all the issues, and now it's
different.
Yeah.
Now it's what we always wanted it to be. And it's like, whoa, this is so cool to see now.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, laying out what the future looks like, I truly believe, I mean, other than small one-off little projects, I think every single job will have some level of reality capture, digitalization, visualization, like using data from this. And when you look at the volume that are using it now and what that looks like over the next 5 and 10 years, it is a massive industry and lots of growth. So though if you get in now, you're a little behind, I think we're just at the curve that is starting to grow to like mass adoption.
Yeah.
So it's something I still encourage a lot of people. If they're like, I don't like what I'm doing, I don't know what to do, I don't know what my college student should do, it's like, get into this.
Yeah, you're behind, but you have so many more resources to catch up now,
Yeah.
which is the cool part about it. Like, yeah, there's lots of experience that you might not have, but you have people you can lean on for that, and lots of use cases and testing, and even the clients now are coming in requesting it. You know, that's one really cool concept is some people are coming in and like they're just kicking out your bid because, oh, you don't have that. That's not part of your job.
Yeah. And some of the end clients it's a requirement now even. Yeah. Where it's like, no, you have to do this scanning at this increment, or you have to deliver this scan to BIM, or you have to use, you know, it's not just a nice to have anymore. And I think we're going to see even that grow, that it becomes a requirement to certain project types, not even just a client wants it, but like across the board. Every type of, you know, renovation, every type of hospital expansion, it's just going to keep growing. It's been doing so. I don't see it slowing down.
Oh, not at all. And the concept too, like we've got a set of construction drawings, and you know that's an entire set, and there's a ton of red lines. Or you go and scan it, and you have one file for the entire building. That's way easier to manage.
Oh yeah,
and you have everything just as it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that alone, the paperwork management, the ability to go back and do your maintenance or your future planning and be able to pull all that from that one thing.
Yeah.
You capture one time, you've got it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I think one part maybe we didn't even talk very deep about, but one of the other benefits when you're talking about scanning or accurate as-builts is not just the accuracy increase, but you're taking, instead of 2D drawings, you're capturing that in 3D. And so if you take that data into a as-built BIM model, right, you're now using that in the design process instead of looking at 2D historically, right? And so the benefits of using it for BIM coordination and other trades now designing off of, and all of that integrating into one thing, it affects everybody in that process. It doesn't make sense to do the design in 3D now, but still try to use old 2D drawings. And then, yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The 2D drawings are still, that's it. That is the final word.
For now.
And it's not changing this year. You know, well, there's only 2 weeks left in this year. But, you know, it's not changing in 24, not 25. But, you know, it's going to change eventually. You know, what we do currently as a company at Hansen-Rice is, you know, we create our BIM model, right? We do all of our Revit modeling, and all of our subs model in Revit, and we share a model, and we coordinate it all, we clash it all. And then as we go to construction and we scan and we capture the as-built conditions, we get our model updated. So when the job is done, we have a fully accurate BIM model based off that scan data, and we have the scan data to just, you know, have with that as well. And you hand that off to the client. Like, here's your building.
And that's going to start changing the joke of the fact that as-builts are not as-builts. Like, over the next 10 years, as this becomes a demand and a requirement, and every company starts doing that, now all owners, all construction there will be actual as-built models of buildings that now can be used for the ongoing maintenance, can be used for future expansions, can be used for space planning. But in order for them to actually be as-built, you do have to scan it at the end and make sure it was built properly, right? And then if an owner wants it to stay true, you have to build in a process now that if you ever do an expansion or you ever do a renovation internally, that you scan and update that. And I think that starts to go to the long-term vision of, like, we could get really deep in what digital twins are. But to me, that is that long-term vision of digital twins for a company who is an owner that has all these assets, is like, how do we build the full process so that during construction it's captured properly, and then it's handed off to a facilities team who has the right file type and platform, and then that company builds in their process that anytime something structurally changes or renovation or whatever, that is always updated. So they always have a true existing conditions within the data and the linking and the facilities maintenance, all the other things that you could do with that model. I think that's what the future really is for all asset owners.
I mean, could you imagine being like the owner of a building, right? And you paid Hansen-Rice to come in. They've captured all your data. They've modeled your building. They've updated all their models, and they give you the model at the end, right? And you're kind of planning some maintenance or maybe some remodel inside that you don't really need to sub out. It's just something you're going to do. But you can take your model, you can cut sections, you can look inside the walls and figure out where everything is. And be like, cool, we can set this piece of equipment here. These anchor bolts aren't going to hit the rebar, so we're good there. We can run, we can knock out this wall. There's no MEP in there. We're not have to worry about that. And we can tie in right here where it's got a hub for conduit, and we can tie right into that.
That becomes the value of data.
Yeah, instead of like having to create this giant mess of new additions and stuff like that, we're just going to rerun everything new. You can figure out, okay, cool, we can actually go back through and we can tie back in. Yeah. And we can do this without any issues. Yeah.
And that becomes part of that benefit, that added benefit that, yes, you originally captured it maybe during construction or maybe at the end of a, expansion or whatever. But now that you have that data, you can use it for simulations. You can use it for, schematics. You can design, come up with a couple options to pitch internally without redoing the whole, process of having to get a company come out to figure out what you even own, and for large owners, that's why I think the digital twin idea of the future for them is so powerful. Is again, there are so many companies that own thousands of buildings and locations and whatever. Imagine that team being able to sit in their office and have a digital screen open and open any building they want and look at, current occupancy or how many people visit it or the data piece and the IoT and the sensors that can get added to those models. Like, it becomes so powerful for those companies to make big decisions. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, and in-house decisions, they can truly plan accurately because they have all the data. And they can look and be like, oh, cool, you know what? This building not going to work for what we need to do in this area. We're going to, remodel it completely, or we can we can retrofit this. We're going to hire somebody out to do that. But like, we have an idea that this will work. It's no longer just, I don't know if this is going to work. Let's try it.
Yeah.
One thing I want to kind of bring up too, though, I think is really, really important is you got to adapt or you're going to die, right? I like bringing up this question to people who have been in the industry for, not in this industry, but in other industries for a long time. Like, when CAD came out, how many companies went under because they refused to do it? One of the biggest mind shifts we've had as a company is, if we don't adapt to this new thing, we're going to go out. We're going to die. We can't just be like, I had this discussion with somebody and they were saying that one of the companies they worked for went out of business because they would not buy AutoCAD because they wanted the client to pay for it, because the client wanted AutoCAD and not paper. It's like, so if you look at our industry now and your mindset is, well, we're not going to do it until the client pays for it, you're going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to die. Yep. It's the simplest thing, is that mindset as an industry has to change. This is what we do. This is why we do it. And whether or not somebody's paying for it is irrelevant, because this is our principle as a company. This is how we do it.
Yep.
This is what must be done. We've hinged on that for a long time of like, no, somebody's got to pay for it. It does cost money. I get that. Somebody's got to pay the bills. But if you're not willing to do that and you're going to rely on a company to pay for it, or your client to pay for it, you're not going to make it. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. And that's a big difference. There's a million quotes out there, right, from, major leaders. But that really is the difference between a industry leader and an industry follower, or seeing a company that is innovative or really falling behind. Is like, if you want to be at the front of these new things and you want to stay a thriving company and you want people to look up to you And I'll actually say that is to the professional or the company or the industry, like any of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be an industry leader, a thought leader, you want your company to be seen as one of the best in the industry, you have to be on that front end and willing to take some of the financial costs, some of the time, some of the risk to try new things, to be ahead, not wait for the client to pay for it, but say like, we actually believe in it so much, we're going to invest in it first, be really good at it, and now start to push that direction in the industry instead of, the ones that are too hesitant, they will fall behind. You can't, I've talked about this quite a bit too. You can't wait until it's a demand and then want to be seen as a thought leader and like jump into it immediately. Like you have to constantly innovate. You can't wait and watch and like, wait, I want everyone else to prove out that it works first and wait and wait and wait. Okay, we're ready to do it. We want to be one of the best. It's like, no, the companies that are forward thinking, they've been doing this behind the scenes. They've been putting in their time and the investment and going through failures and figuring it out. You can't catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you put 10 years of deep innovation and understanding all these tech and putting it in, you can't get in 1 year the same information someone can in 10.
Yeah, you're going to have all these micro experiences and knowledge is transferable, right? Like, so you've made all these mistakes, you've tried all these things. So when something new happens, you already have decades of experience to answer that question right away.
Yep.
You can't just come in and be like, well, I learned all this online, last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be able to answer that question. It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
You got to have some of that experience and confidence.
Yep.
As a company, if you're going to have a department that's doing reality capture, VDC, that kind of thing, you want that department to be on the cutting edge.
Yep.
Somewhere around it. Maybe not the bleeding edge. That's for the service providers, but around the cutting edge.
Yeah.
As a company, you want to be a little off of that because you want to be able to utilize it because some of these things aren't going to come to fruition. They might work, but they might not hang around. So you want that department here, cutting edge, learning, testing, R&D, trying to figure out what does and doesn't work for you.
Yep.
And then the company can live here safely and happily. And that's a big thing that a lot of companies are concerned about is the risk factor of like, well, if we buy this equipment and in 2 years it's obsolete or it doesn't work anymore or it's not, it's not what we thought it would be.
Yeah.
That's a big risk. And I understand that's a big concern. So you have your department and that's what they do.
Yeah.
They get to go through that whole process. They get to fail.
Yep.
And they get to find what doesn't work.
Yep.
And then they get to bring it to the company so the company can live a little more safely. And because you have to have that. You have to have that healthiness.
Yeah.
We've seen companies that have built departments and then killed them.
Yep.
Because it just didn't work.
Yep.
But they were trying to change it on a global scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to have some balance there.
And it has to be a long-term strategy because massive change is not instant. It takes time. It takes going through the headaches, going through the failures. And that's why, like, when we go to that conversation of who should adopt it, should we build a department? Should we use someone else? It's like you have to decide as a company why and what and be in it for the big picture and the long term, because to invest in the tech, to invest in the people, to go through training, to build processes, like it's not an overnight thing and it's not easy and it's not simple. And you have to design everything you do around if you're going to do it yourselves, you're going to outsource, what level of it you're going to do, all of that. From infrastructure and IT to support to training to equipment.
Oh God, IT loves me.
It is. Oh yeah, they love everybody. Data.
Well, you can't be an island either. You know, as a department, because you aren't the expert in the building or in the design or in the paperwork side of it. Whatever it is, you have to be completely meshed into your company. I like to say I'm the redhead stepchild of Hansen-Rice. Like I'm in everybody's business all the time. I'm just kind of all over the place. But that's what makes it work. That's what makes it successful is the fact that I can go through and I have no pride to say like, you're better at this. Mm-hmm. I know the tools. You know the problems. Yeah. How do you use this tool for that problem? And if you can do that successfully and get your entire company on board with that concept of sharing that knowledge, and you're not just an isolated island that's, we call those guys when we need something. Yep. No, they're literally embedded in everything you do. They're in the kickoff meetings. They're in the construction. Yep. They're doing, construction administration. They're helping out. They're doing the closeout commissioning and talking to the, you have to live through that entire project. Mm-hmm. If you don't live through the entire thing, it's going to get cut off somewhere and it's going to continually get chopped down further and further to the point that you're just obsolete.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think every big company should have a dedicated innovation, R&D, testing, whether it's a person or a department, depending on size or, buy-in. But then, like you said, those people have to get really integrated with the other parts of the company to understand their pain points to try to solve those, as opposed to, what you see a lot of companies do wrong is just pitch that we can scan for you and give you scan data. It's like, no, but like, that's not what they want. They're trying to solve their problems. Mm-hmm. What is the actual problem? And how can you deliver something that is really solving or improving that specifically? Too many people try to sell the ability to use the technology as opposed to identify the problem they can specifically actually solve with it.
Mm-hmm. That's it right there. Like, the client wants this. Your company wants to solve that, but they need this. And then here you are down here trying to figure out all of that and how to provide the tools for that. You are an expert in the tool.
Yep.
Help them succeed in what they have to do.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the cool thing. You're the Leatherman there. You're kind of the multi-tool of solving problems.
Yep.
All the way up to marketing, pretty pictures and doodads. And
yeah, it is one thing that's fun about all the technology. It actually can touch a little bit of everything. It can actually help the construction process. It can be useful for marketing. It can be used for sales and proposals. It actually can help so many different departments or project types. It's what makes it fun, but also challenging, I think, for a lot of people, is they're like lost at where do we start? What do we use it for? Who do we sell it to? It's like, everybody has a different answer. It depends on them.
just start.
Yeah.
Just somewhere.
Yeah.
Pick something and start, and you'll watch it grow. And it's gonna be bad at first.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yep.
Harbor that, hedge your bets a little bit in what you do. Don't just go out and say, like, we're gonna buy a scanner today. We're gonna start this department tomorrow. And then on day 3, we're gonna go straight to a job.
Yeah.
Maybe not do that.
Yep.
Maybe do something a little small in-house. Test it out. Find your hiccups. Find out that your computer can't handle it and you need a better computer.
Yeah. That's one thing I still see a lot of people do wrong is they'll believe in the tech, but they'll go straight to using it on a real project instead of like, we need to do a couple test projects and make sure that the kinks are worked out. Make sure we understand how it really works and what really is coming out and what the accuracy is. Because if you do that in a test project, a test environment, you're gonna figure out things, you're gonna have headaches. If you actually go do it on a job first, that's where you have problems because you mess something up, the project's delayed, the client's not happy, now they don't believe in the technology. So anybody that's getting into the new tech has to take the time, and again, it's an investment in cost or time or whatever, but like, fully prove it out and test it before you go try to pitch it or show it to somebody.
Mm-hmm. And then I'd always recommend too, like, do it in parallel to a current project. Yeah, go capture the data. And then as the building's being built, go through and, supplementally do a side project. That's your sandbox project to test out. Be like, oh, hey, look, we ran into this issue.
Yeah.
Notate that down, which would be really powerful to go, prove the ROI and be like, look, right here, we solved this issue.
Yep.
It wouldn't happen. And if you can do that, and then you can truly see it in a project where real life mistakes are going to happen, man, what a powerful tool that would be.
Yeah. No, it's a great suggestion. Well, I think you already said what maybe you would say again if I asked you this question, but I'm going to ask you anyways. So through everything, kind of the journey you've been on in the industry and in the technology and even just your career journey, okay, what's some advice you would leave with the listeners, whether it's along the side of mindset change or being willing to take the risks or the failures, or what comes to mind as we're kind of wrapping up? What do you leave them with?
Yeah. I think of 2 different things. As a company, there has to be a mind shift, right? You really have to embrace the fact that this is what you do. Doesn't matter if it's paid for. Doesn't matter what other people are doing. Doesn't matter what your competitors are doing. You got to pick your lane. You got to be a value add. Yes. Can't just be everybody else off the street. And then you got to do it. It's just plain and simple. It doesn't matter anything else. Pick it, do it, and run with it. If you don't, you're just kind of always going to be in this wishy-washy state of nothing's ever going to get done. And I think as an individual in the industry, something that I'm just learning the hard way after we're 10 years in this is legitimately a sales job.
Mm-hmm.
Once you can figure that out, you'll start to see a lot more growth. Once you understand that, like, I'm going to have to sell this.
Yeah.
I think everybody looks at it the same way we do. We're like, well, you can see the tool and you can see all the possibilities.
Yeah.
Not everybody's like that.
Nope.
The majority of people are not like that.
Yep.
You're going to have to sell it to them. And it's not just an insurance policy. It's not just pretty pictures. You know, you've got to kind of look at your company or your client as a whole and be like, where are your problems? Here's your solution. That's what they're coming to pay you for. You're the expert in solving their problems.
Yep.
Those
are good.
That's a big one for me right now that I'm struggling with.
That one is very true. And, you know, on that note, the only thing I'd expand on for the sales piece is like a lot of people also look at sales wrong. They should almost replace the word sales with educate. Yeah. Like the best way to sell is to not be salesy. It is to educate. It is to understand and then educate them on how you can solve a problem. You know, you see a lot of people out there in the industry that are hardcore sales that are just like pushing and pushing and pushing in the product and the this, and this is what we can do. And it's like that, a lot of people have an immediate shut off to that.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the approach of like, hey, I want to meet with you and understand your problems, and then you educate them all on like, here's the different solutions, here's the differences in how we could solve this problem or this one, and we're just educating you so you have options. That it's like a behind the scenes, it is a sale. But it's more looking at the problems they have and educating on the knowledge or the expertise, whatever type of company you are, whatever it is that you're trying to sell. If it's from that softer, supportive educational route, it is much more welcomed. And again, it's a lot easier to sell when you're actually solving their problem than trying to sell something that, again, that idea of people trying to sell the technology, right? You see a lot of people as they get into this out there just pushing like, if you ever need laser scanning, call me. It's like, there's like 1,000 of you.
Mm-hmm. All the time.
What's different? Like, let's actually dig into like, why? What do you do? How do you use it? How are you going to solve problems we haven't already run into? So education, and then also really that kind of consultancy side of it, like willing to invest your time into a relationship that you're trying to sell. Also night and day difference, because people like working with people. People want to work with people they can trust. And you can't just do that by cold emailing someone a pitch to work for them. You have to build that relationship a little bit, invest some upfront time and cultivate that trust with someone. And then they only want to buy from you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're at the time now where we have clients already coming in asking for scanning, reality capture, whatever you want. They're already here.
Yeah.
They're already asking for that. I look back at like, I like to have subs come in, and when they come in and they do their dog and pony, I don't really give them much, my background. I want to hear what they have to say. And that's that hardcore sales guy. And he's just telling me all this stuff. And I'm just sitting there like, nope, that won't work either. I know that won't work because I've tried it. And then you sit down at the end, like, I like to like at the end be like, hey, well, I have some questions about these things. I've been doing this for a long time. Like, these are my experiences. Like, you said this will work. How? They're like, oh, well, So like you said, it's an education thing. If you're open and honest, there's nothing wrong with telling a client, you don't need this tool.
Yep.
This won't work. You don't need me.
Yep.
Here's what you actually need. You know
why? And why? Because as soon as you are honest and willing to tell someone what they don't need, now I trust you more.
Mm-hmm.
Because if all you're doing is like hard selling that this is the tool, it can do everything you possibly want. You want, like, okay, there's something wrong. You're a hardcore sales guy.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you're like, hey, you actually don't need this. You need, you could use this more, but that's too much. And that, like, as soon as you're willing to be honest and show people not just this shiny tool or just the promised land, right? Like, as soon as you help them and guide them away from something wrong, you're like, okay, I actually want to listen to you more now. Keep going.
Yeah, you're solution focused, not sales focused. And that's what they're trying to find.
Yep.
They don't need a salesman.
And I'll say the result of that is the long-term growth and success of that partnership. I have seen a lot of people, you do that shiny sales pitch up front. You win one job. Good job. You did it. But if you pitched the wrong tool, you pitched the wrong thing just to get that sale, and you didn't truly give them the right thing, you're going to lose the relationship. You'll never get repeat work. You're going to fail. You're going to have a bad reputation. So actually honestly solving a problem, even if it's the one that you don't make as much money for. So let's say a service provider, right? Service providers out there saying, hey, we have all these tools, but we want to sell you the most expensive option. We want to do all this layout. We want to do all this high level intense stuff. And we want to do all this conversion to all these models. And we make it all visualization. Why? Because that makes them the most revenue. Mm-hmm. Lots of people go that route. Same reason from a survey background, like people say, oh, the iPhone is terrible. It's like, well, yeah, but maybe it's the right tool for a certain job. If you're willing to not just do what's in your interest, that's best and most beneficial for you, but you're truly helping them solve the problem, that is what builds that ultimate trust. And you're going to have a long-term relationship that becomes, 10x what the value of that one little project would have been, because you're really helping. You have to see yourself as a partner. When I think about a client historically, like being a service provider and being in a client's shoes, I'm like, I want to treat myself as though I work for their company. Like we together should solve the right problem. The money, care about that later. Yes, you have to make money, but that will come. Yeah.
That's they're going to call you when they have another question. You've built that relationship, and that relationship is so much more valuable, because eventually they're going to have the question. They know who to call, mm-hmm. and you're going to be the one with the solution for it.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. I mean, that's the genesis of our relationship with my current company was they hired somebody to do a job that was all sales, and it did not go well.
No.
I mean, we spent you and Nick spent rotating shifts for 3 weeks trying to get that data to work.
Yeah.
And, we were blessed with the fact that company was like, okay, let's try again.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And
it was on a small straw. They're like, look, we'll try again, but if this one doesn't work, they'll never do it again.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're gonna help you figure this out.
And did we do? Yeah, we succeeded in that very well. And we've created a beautiful, long, decade-long relationship that has no, future plans of changing. And that's literally just coming from we don't think this is going to work, but we're going to try.
Yeah.
But we do know how to fix it if it doesn't.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a matter of we wanted to sell you the Cadillac. We were like, this is what you guys want to achieve. This is the right tools. We actually have some experience in doing that, and we can help you find that solution. And that evolved with, even in that own project, that evolved on the job. We were, well, actually, you guys are going to be doing that too. Why don't we get that? We can tie it all together and on the fly and solve that problem. And that was not based on cost. I don't even think we charged them for it. We just captured the extra data, and because we were trying to solve that problem, and that creates a lasting relationship. That's how you get your foot in the door and maintain that foot in the door, get invited to the company picnic, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You can't just come in and hit me up on LinkedIn and tell me that you do this. I understand you do.
You and everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I usually just ignore those messages.
Yeah.
I don't even look at them.
Yeah.
But, if you're coming in asking questions and really interested in, learning. Yeah. That's a lot more impactful, because you're going to have some experience I don't. Yeah. And I'm going to learn from that. You're going to learn from that. We can create a good relationship from that. If you come in, like you said, approaching it from the solution-based, not the sales-based. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just how you approach that obstacle.
Yep. Man, those are all good points. So care about people, build relationships with people, educate them, be willing to fail, try new things. I think we got some good points in there.
Oh, yeah.
It was good. All right. Well, thank you, Joe, for coming in again. Excited to share this out. And I'm sure it won't be the last time the community sees you or hears from you.
I hope not.
All right.
Thank
you very much. We'll see you guys next time.